Dr. B.H. Hester. She serves on several boards, including the American Friends of Jamaica, and is the board chair of the Africa Society. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
So
you.
uh, let's jump right into it. Until January or February of this year, the world was moving along in seeming prosperity. Stock markets were doing great. We were touting that economies were great. And then came COVID-19 and all that changed. So it's pretty obvious to see when there is financial equality based on how someone looks or what they drive or size of their house, etc. But now, in the time of COVID, there are inequalities that are based on environment that are being revealed, and they are more startling than we might have imagined. Mr. Orain, I'm going to read a quote from you. COVID-19 has delivered an extraordinarily sharp shock to us, demonstrating that environmental degradation, climate change, and inequality are all inextricably linked. This is a two-part question. First, explain what the environment has to do with the spread of COVID, and explain the direct linkage between environmental issues and social inequalities.
Well, the first one, and that is how is the environment linked to COVID-19? We, the human race, we are destroying one football field every 6 seconds of virgin forest across the world. As we do that, we run into viruses in their natural habitat, which hop over into our human race. And COVID-19 is the most recent one, but not the first and certainly won't be the last. And that is the genesis of why we're in this position. Now, the question is, what's the link between the environment and inequality? It goes both ways. It forms a feedback loop. So environmental degradation leads to inequality, and inequality leads to environmental degradation. Let me give you a couple of examples of that.
Yes, please.
Let's take Hurricane Katrina. That was an example of an event that we never expected, but the people who suffered the most were the ones who had the greatest inequality because they lived in areas that were low-lying. They had less financial resources in order to resist a natural disaster like that. They weren't able to buy insurance. And then what happens after that? That environmental degradation leads to them becoming even poorer. Right. And so we have a choice. Well, but here's the choice. We can continue that feedback loop declining in a ever descending circle of greater inequality and more environmental degradation. Or we can say, hold on a minute, we need to rethink how we live. And that's the moment we're at now. It's a reset moment. And that is that we find a way to change direction and enter a virtuous upward cycle. And that's why I believe this COVID-19 pandemic gives us the opportunity, which probably comes only once every century, to change the direction of our societies, not only in Jamaica or the United States, but right across the world.
Right. Well, you're saying once a century, but I do recall a potential Ebola virus happening, and because it was actually addressed the right way, it did not become a pandemic as it potentially could have. But I do want to follow up on the question as well, what the environment has to do with the spread of COVID. So you kind of alluded to it a while ago. If you're not in, and perhaps an upper class society where you don't have to mix with your neighbors, you may be more exposed to it. But is that what you mean by the environment, or how does the environment affect us now, specifically with COVID?
So we'll break it down into two segments.
Yeah.
Social inequality leading to environmental degradation. Social inequality, people who are poor live in overcrowded conditions. Therefore, they're more likely to get ill in a pandemic. They live without access to adequate health care, so they're more likely to be less healthy and probably die. They're less likely to have a balanced diet of the kinds of fresh foods that we need in order to keep our bodies healthy. So they're more likely to be less healthy. That leads to further environmental degradation. Why? They're probably not able to get access to education, which would cause them to understand why we need to behave differently. And then that leads to even greater degradation of the environment in which they live. Now, the other way, which is the environment leading to social inequality, I've mentioned one already, hurricanes. I've mentioned another one, deforestation. I'm going to give you another example, commercial overfishing in off the coast of Africa. What it has caused is for poor people in Africa to have to eat more bushmeat. In other words, to eat wild animals in order to live. I didn't know this until a couple of weeks ago when I started to do the research for this conversation. There are 150 million people in the world who eat wild animals because they have no other choice. But here is where the really alarming fact is. There are between 300,000 and a million viruses living in natural reservoirs of wild animals out there that we are pushing into as we expand our civilization. And that's why we have COVID-19, which hopped into our human system less than a year ago.
Right.
Now, that's frightening to me. So
It is very frightening.
that means everybody, folks, think about it this way. Every time we clear some more forest to grow soya or palm oil, when we go into the forest in order to clear for roads, it means we're coming in contact with more viruses that are able to hop over to us. That wasn't the case 10,000 years ago, but it sure is the case now that we have 7 billion people living on this planet in greater inequality than we have had for centuries.
Right. And Ambassador Bridgewater, let me turn to you because that, as Mr. Arain just shared, there is us pushing into the environment, but there's also this thing where we take the wild animals, you know, in this case, it is the hypothesis is that it was a bat, you know, so some kind of bat meat that was in a wet market in China that started this virus. So we can bring it into our environment ourselves. And I would imagine that a lot of the time it might be the poorer classes, as we say, that that are exposed to this type of circumstance because of the same inequity that we're talking about. So we've talked about financial inequity. We've talked about how the environment is affected based on how much your personal environment is affected based on how much money you might have. Can you talk about how some of the other ways that these inequalities might be manifested, and what are the unfortunate eventual results that are the result of these disparities?
Well, thank you very much, Khalib, and thanks to my good friend, the Honorable Doug Orain, for his wonderful overview of the environmental impact of COVID-19. We know the United States Centers for Disease Control reported at the onset of this COVID-19 that COVID-19 was the great equalizer because we were seeing that the cases of COVID-19 were impacting everyone, regardless of race or class or whatever. But in fact, as this disease progressed, we have seen that rather than being an equalizer, it has been a great unequalizer. It has maximized the inequalities that people of color, for example, are experiencing as a result of COVID-19. We see that in the numbers of deaths of persons of color in the United States, which have been disproportionate to our numbers in the population. So why is that? We've looked at issues such as lack of adequate health care, which has been an ongoing situation in the Black community and in communities of color. We look at the fact that people of color are often the people who are the essential workers, right. The sanitation workers, the persons who have to drive the buses, the person who have to clean the hotels and who are in restaurants, et cetera. We also know that Black community are people who live in communities that don't have access to the nourishing kinds of foods that would help them develop a more healthy body. we call them green deserts in many of those communities because the grocery stores don't contain the fresh fruits and vegetables that are needed for healthy diets. And sometimes they simply just won't go into the predominantly Black and communities of color. So we are working hard to try to reverse those kinds of things because we know that they lead to comorbidity issues, which increase the impact and the incidence of COVID-19, such as diabetes, hypertension, et cetera. And we believe, and I think it's a fact that some of those conditions are experienced in Jamaica as well. So those are factors that show that COVID-19 has brought about greater degrees of inequality in the numbers of deaths among Black people and people of color versus non-white.
Right. And it is particularly challenging because we are all people of color on this call. So whether or not you're in that circumstance, you're seeing it and it must affect you. We are, Ambassador Bridgewater and I, based in the United States. Mr. Arain, you are in Jamaica. And I'll refer to a circumstance that you spoke of, Mr. Arain, with the Spanish flu from 1918. That was the last time we had this once in a century type of pandemic hit the world. And that was a time when there were not planes, trains, and automobiles connecting everything all the time. At that time, it would have taken so long for one person to get from China to Jamaica, whereas now that can happen in the course of, probably just over 24 hours or less. Everything is interconnected. So when one thing happens at one place in the world, it's not a matter of if now, it's a matter of when it is going to hit everything else, if it is not properly contained. Jamaica has been getting several shout outs for doing a great job of containing the pandemic. We here in the US, Ambassador Bridgewater, we're not so lucky. Can you both, I'm going to open this to both of you. Can you talk about what governments should be doing, whether it is now in this circumstance to improve the situation as it is in the world, or if it's too late in this place and time that we are, next time it happens, how do we prevent it from the beginning?
Well, it's never too late. So where I would start is what have we done in Jamaica? And when I say we, it's all 3 million of us here working with our government. The first one is that we have moved together as one people and we have moved quickly. The first imported case of COVID-19 was diagnosed on March 10th, and on March 13th, all schools in Jamaica were closed and still are closed. Secondly, social distancing was put into effect virtually immediately. Got to stay at least 6 feet apart, wearing masks, hand washing. That was a big one up front to teach us to sing a song that lasts at least 20 seconds in order to make sure.
Can I cut you to ask a quick question? The social distancing in Jamaica, I know how we are. We like to be around other Jamaican people or other people. We like to party. We like to hold hands and touch each other. How difficult was that to even try and implement in Jamaica?
Well, of course, it was difficult. One of the most difficult things I found was the requirement not to touch my face, not to touch my hands to my mouth, nose, or eyes. And it took me about 3 weeks to learn how to do it, but I've done it. So you can watch me online, folks.
Very good.
Learned that from the end of March. But yes, that's an issue. But I think peer pressure is one of the things that's happening. So you will see people come together and somebody say, remember, I'm protecting you and you are protecting me. But there are some other things that are absolutely critical that we did. We actually put into place curfews. The first ones were from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Jamaica was never locked down. What happened was that there were restrictions. So people like me over 65, the Prime Minister said, you can only go out for essential purposes once a supermarket or pharmacy. That's it. And so that has been working. So we realized, who do we need to protect? All the people. We restricted flights into and out of Jamaica. And I think the two things that made the biggest difference and continue to is testing and contact tracing. So when another case popped up very early, it was identified as a village in eastern Jamaica. That village was quarantined, everybody in it, for 2 weeks. And that basically caused the virus to die out. There was another outbreak in a parish with 500,000 people, St. Catherine, and that was quarantined. Everybody in it, 500,000 people for 2 weeks, and that quelled the outbreak. And so each time that the virus pops up, that is done. But you have to be on top of it in terms of testing and contact tracing. Contact tracing means you go to every person who has it and say, who have you been in touch with for the last week or 10 days, so we can test them as well. So it has worked. We're at about 600 cases for 3 million people after over 3 months and 10 deaths. And I don't think we have had a death in weeks. So it's working. We have also been very cautious about opening up the tourist industry. So one has to apply online beforehand to get approval to fly in. But in addition, you get tested when you get to the airport. And one of the things that tourists are amazed at, we have an app, the government has an app that you download on your phone, which tracks you. So if you move far beyond where you said you're going, you'll get a phone call that says, hey, I just noticed that you moved further than you said you are going.
Where are you going?
Here you are. And that is what is required. Now, this issue about personal freedom, you have to balance it against the rest of our society. And that's where the big mind shift comes in. We need to be acting in each other's interest. And imagine our older people and the very young that we want to protect as we go through this crisis.
Right. Well, those are all very good points. And I'm going to say that I believe that Jamaica would have come to those realizations based on some of the things that perhaps were working in the Asian countries. I did hear about that app from, I think, South Korea or somewhere like that. So it seems that the rest of the world is collaborating in certain ways on what has worked, what has not worked, what the best practices are to protect our people. Ambassador Bridgewater, Mr. Rain just alluded to this thing about personal freedom, that Americans, like to fly their Confederate flags and say, I'm free to not wear my face mask and all this kind of stuff. Having worked in government as long as you have and been in a country like Africa and a country like Jamaica where there are not as many resources. So I don't know that Jamaica has the luxury of being as cavalier as America because, apparently we're not as rich as Jamaica may not be as rich as America, may not theoretically have the same kind of health resources and so forth. You've been in disadvantaged countries and they are doing better right now for caring for their people than is America doing. Talk about how governments in other countries work to protect their people and what could have been done better. Mr. Rain talked about what Jamaica has done very well. What could have been done better in terms of communication between those other governments and even the US government?
Well, let me firstly say how happy I am that Jamaica has taken the steps that it has and took those steps early and decisively. And I think that kind of action has proven to be very, very important in of course, slowing down the spread of COVID-19 in Jamaica. And we talk about other nations around the world vis-a-vis the United States. The United States is a large federal state. And as such, we have that division of powers. Those powers are the national powers, federal powers, they're the state powers, and then they're the local, city, and municipal powers, each with authority and each with ways that they can act. Clearly, in the case of COVID-19, there were, I believe, there was a slower response than we needed to have at the onset. There were missteps taken that I think people have acknowledged. And then there have been the, let's say, the balance in terms of what the states would be able to do and what the federal government would have to do. But I think the key to any crisis situation in any nation around the world is what the leadership will do at the top. And you mentioned countries around the world, the lesser advantaged countries in many respects, but maybe advantaged in other respects, able to get a hold on things very quickly and decisively and take actions. We looked at Jamaica, we look at South Africa that took steps very early on and decisively, and Kenya also. But in the United States, we had to ensure that the states were able to make their decisions. But I think we know that that synergy between the federal and the state governments was very, very difficult at the onset before things could level off. We look at it in terms of the supplies that were needed for personal protective equipment for the hospitals to treat the patients. We saw those hiccups. We saw the difficulty in acquiring the materials that were needed. And this slowed down our response, and I think led to many of the deaths that took place. So as those things began to level off and there had to be more equipment, more doctors, people across states were sending doctors where there were epicenters. You know, many people sent the doctors up to New York, which was the very, very large epicenter for a long period of time before it leveled off. So states began to cooperate. And as we are seeing now, there are openings at different levels, at different state levels.
Right.
And we've seen sometimes where the personal responsibility, the individual responsibility, you talk about Jamaicans liking to gather and hold hands. Well, we've seen the beaches in Florida. We've seen the places in the US, the bars where people gathered. I think man by nature is social. We want to get together. We want to talk to each other. Our churches want to be able to open their doors. My husband's a pastor, and so he's been using a live virtual stream for his services, even though churches can open up now in certain numbers. But again, the personal responsibility. We as individuals have to use our knowledge and we have to use our common sense to know that it is incumbent upon each of us to do the right thing. And that is to socially distance continually, and that is to wear masks. So our government clearly, our governments on all the levels clearly have now started to work better together, but our fight is not over. We've seen spikes that are continuing, and we know what we have to do individually and collectively to stop this spread.
Right. Okay. All right. So Mr. O'Rein, I'm going to thank you for that answer, Ambassador Bridgewater. Mr. O'Rein, I'm going to turn back to you. And you say that it is important for nations to address inequality if we're all to be safer against this type of pandemic in the future. However, in reality, if I'm rich and I can go quarantine in my house and send someone by Instacart or whatever, in America here, we have a thing named Instacart. You pay somebody on the internet and they go bring your groceries to your home, right? And in my palatial mansion, I can do that all the time. And you who are poor can go and do the essential work and I will stay protected. So why is it that you say if we're all to be safer, we have to address this inequality? I'm rich, I'm fine. Why do I need to care?
And there's a simple answer in one sentence, because we're all interlinked as members of the human race. And globalization has brought us all closer together. And there's no way of stepping out of that linkage. So as wealthy as you are, it's going to catch up with you somewhere. And if it's not with disease, it's going to be in terms of lifestyles, because it means that our lifestyles are going to have to change. I have a view. This group of human beings on the planet today, us, we have the opportunity to change the direction of the human condition for hundreds of years into the future. Or we can cause it to get much worse because we're at this inflection point because of what is happening. Really, the penny that has to drop is that the way that we have organized the world is not sustainable. It can't be, and we're seeing it. And I don't mean to sound negative about this, but I hear people say, oh, once we get up there, once we get a vaccine, we'll be fine again. Well, the reality is, if you look at the research, HIV/AIDS has been with us for 30 years and we still haven't got a vaccine. What we have got are antiviral drugs that can help to control it. And we have had to change our individual behaviors as a result of that virus. And so therefore we have to accept that behaviors will need to change in order for us to thrive as the human race. And that is the big issue. Now we need leadership. So we need our leaders at every level, nations, globally, collaborating at the individual level in our communities, at the state level, or whatever the equivalent is in whichever country that you live in now it's our parish councils, to say, got to change gears. And inequality is actually at the root of causing this to happen more frequently. So we have to address that issue frontally.
Mhm. Ambassador Bridgewater, do you have any thoughts on that? Like, why is it important for if rich? I'm so sorry, I don't know how to do that. Pause and break. If it is that that rich people are not necessarily as affected by issues like this, why should they care? Why should they actually take the initiative to try and make it better?
Well, I think Doug has spoken wisely to this. We are in an interdependent world, whether we have our palatial mansions or whatever. If you fly in an airplane and you don't have your private pilot and your private jet, you're dependent on that air attendant, you're dependent on that pilot, you're dependent on the people who have to get those planes ready to take off. You're dependent if you want to take a luxury train ride across country or whatever. So therefore, it's incumbent upon those who are more affluent to work and to insist and to be cognizant of the need for all people, all humanity, to have access to a good paying job, to good health care, to good education foremost. And all of these things go into helping us become knowledgeable individuals who can then react when there are situations such as COVID or other things that will impact us as human beings, as we've heard about. So I think very important things.
Yes. And I'm going to take this opportunity to just plug our patron of this event, the American Friends of Jamaica. If you are wealthy and you are watching, here are some of the reasons why you need to contribute to this organization. All right, Ambassador Bridgewater, let's get back into the meat of the inequality issue. You note that inequality in America has now become so clear and present that the anger over it is spilling into the streets. And just like the pandemic of COVID, it's almost become a pandemic the way that there's a visceral reaction to the inequality that the layoffs from COVID and the lack of health insurance based on COVID and so forth. There's this visceral reaction happening to those kinds of inequalities that have spilled over from the streets of America to the streets of everywhere in the world. Can you talk briefly about the centuries of injustice toward the African diaspora in the US that is now causing all of that spillover of reaction?
Well, thank you so much for that question. It's been 401 years now since our ancestors were brought here as slaves into the United States. And over the course of those 400 years, many things have taken place. We've seen the institution of slavery end legislatively, even though Blacks in some parts of our country only learned about it a couple years after the actual Emancipation Proclamation. But nonetheless, we've seen the ability to vote. But yet, in all of those situations of so-called progress, and that has been progress in a sense, that progress has come at a very slow pace when we look at 400 years. There have been lynchings, there have been the Jim Crow laws, there have been the segregation, separate but unequal, supposedly separate but equal in terms of education. And all of these things have compounded to a situation in the United States that has again boiled over. And I say again, because we know in the period of the civil rights movement in the 60s, and I'm a product of that. I was a sit-inner, I was a peaceful protester carrying my placard. So a shout out to the peaceful young people who are protesting the inequalities and the unjust things that are happening right now. So I think when we were in the midst of the pandemic, and then we experienced, for everybody to see, a brutal murder of an unarmed African American. This was not the first case, of course. But when George Floyd was choked to death, 8 minutes and 46 seconds, for the world to view, the lid popped off. And the lid popped off not only in the United States, but for everyone who saw that video. And we recognized and we realized that those centuries of work to reverse the evils of slavery and the injustices of slavery were still upon us, because we know now that incarceration among Black Americans, particularly men, is totally off the mark in terms of the disproportionate numbers of Blacks who are incarcerated. Like to think of that as that prison industrial complex. That's where we find the young Black men. So people around the world have decided we have issues in our countries and our nations too, with inequalities and unjust behaviors. So I believe that the launch now is that we all want to make a difference. But we want to make a difference that's going to be significant and not just a Band-Aid solution. We want to make a difference that is going to cause systemic racism to be dealt with in a systemic way that will yield positive results. Now, this isn't going to happen overnight. I'm not under any illusions that it will happen overnight. But I think that there is a different feel and a different atmosphere that is impacting United States citizens, but citizens around the world. And I think it's a very positive thing. And I think that it is showing a level of responsibility that individuals are assuming for what is happening, because governments can't nor should they do it all. It's a two-way street.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Thank you. So, Mr. Rain, let me thank you for that answer. That hit the nail on the head. And I think we're all learning. Part of what is happening now is that we're learning. Those of us not originally from the U.S. are learning about this history of slavery in America, which is different from the history of slavery in the Caribbean islands, where we were the majority, and in America, the enslaved Africans were the minority. So it's always enlightening to hear perspectives on that. Mr. Orain, you talked about establishing new patterns of behavior after the AIDS. That wasn't a pandemic, but when AIDS became a situation, I think that we were to be concerned about, we changed our behavior based on that reality. And there became a new normal in terms of how you were interacting with intimate partners, regardless of what it started off as something that was, categorized as related to the homosexual community. And at a certain point, it became everyone's concern. And there became a new normal. After 9/11, another example, America is the country that was targeted. The state of New York is the state that was targeted. But since that time, I have to take my shoes off every time I go through the airport. I cannot drink water inside the airport. And those changes have stuck with us since that time. That new normal has been established. So here's a question for you. It seems that we will have to coexist with COVID, at least for the foreseeable future. What are some of the changes you recommend that we make individually and societally as we establish this new normal? Or do you believe that once there is a vaccine, which you just said, do you believe that once there is a vaccine, most people will forget about the lessons and go back to the old ways?
I'm an optimist at heart, and so I am looking for the opportunities that come out of a crisis like this. You know, they have a saying, don't make a crisis go to
Go
waste.
to waste.
So I'm going to give you a couple examples. The first one is the digitization of technology. For years, decades in Jamaica, we have been struggling with how to make our educational system more equal for poor and rich alike. And one of the things that we have recognized is that by having digital technology to teach and learn, it closes the gap, if it's done well, between the poorest and the richest kids. Here we have an opportunity where we have had to move literally within weeks to implement it. So here in Jamaica, you have all these kids learning digitally from home because schools have been closed since March 13th. And before, people were saying, well, it'll take us a long time. Well, it hasn't taken us a long time. But here is what we need to do now. We need to make sure that every child in Jamaica has two things by September. That's only 2 months from now. One is reliable internet access at home, and secondly, an instrument that will allow them access to the world to educate themselves through online technology, whether it's a laptop, a tablet, or a smartphone. And
Because
what
this is where inequality can jump in again, because yes.
Yeah, no, you make your point, and I like.
Right, because as you're saying all of this, I'm thinking again to the wealthy person and the not wealthy person scenario. Wealthy person already has all of this stuff. How do you outfit an entire, let us say, Garrison community with computers and so forth for children, and make sure everybody has internet? When I don't know the equivalent to Comcast, but whatever that company is in Jamaica wants to charge everybody for internet service. How does that happen?
It is done by community initiative, and I am seeing a renaissance of the Jamaican diaspora to support this initiative, to say, I want to help so that every child in Jamaica will get a digital tool by September of this year. And we have donations pouring in for that. People saying, I want to help my community where I came from, or my school, or whatever. The same thing is happening locally in Jamaica, because it's an opportunity to close the gap in a very short period of time. And you know, when you have a crisis like this, we're able to move very quickly because people say, hey, we got to do it now. A second example I want to share with you is one I have personally made, and that is I am eating more Jamaican grown fresh food, both fresh vegetables and fresh fruit. So for lunch, I had yellow yam, green bananas, and breadfruit.
No, you're now rubbing it in.
Come on back to Jamaica. You can eat like that. But we need to change our cultural approach to how we eat. We need to eat what we grow. The fact that the tourism industry has had to be temporarily closed, but is now coming back, means that farmers, we need to help them to pivot, to sell to our Jamaican populace. And we Jamaicans need to change our eating habits to eat more local food rather than imported food. And it's part of risk management. It's not just about, well, it's nice to eat these because they're healthier. What happens with the next crisis, the next pandemic, the next disruption of shipping in the world? Where will we get enough food to keep on eating for months into the future? And so I see this as a huge opportunity. It will also create employment for our young people in rural areas. And I see lots of good coming out of that. So that's just two examples.
Very nice. Did you have any that you wanted to contribute, Ambassador Bridgewater?
Well, I want to just say that while I lived in Jamaica, I always ate locally. I found fresh fruits and vegetables to be much more desirous of the things that I got that were imported. And I would always wonder why Jamaicans didn't eat their wonderful local foods. So I would certainly condone that. And I would also say that in terms of the behaviors that we're going to have to, I believe, try to implement, and that is that we have to be more cognizant of what is happening in our communities. The community level is where so much of the important transformation must take place. No, we support a lot of important things by the things that we do in terms of the gifts we give, but do we listen to the communities? Do we engage them? Because I really believe that those people living in the communities really know best what their needs are and how to address those needs. What they need from us who are better able to assist is to help them get where they know they need to be. So I think that it's a partnership that is so going to be so very important as we move ahead. And I certainly agree that in the US, we still have areas that are, in terms of the digital divide, we need to make sure that every community, every household with a school-aged child is able to have that pad or that tablet or whatever they need to learn. That is going to be crucial. And as we engage with our philanthropic work, I think that we can request that our partners provide this kind of support. So I would say that we have many, many opportunities that we can utilize as we go forward. And I want to take my hat off to AFJ for its community involvement over many years and what it continues to do. So a great shout out to AFJ.
That was a little shout out. We keep sneaking them in where we can. And Ambassador Bridgewater, I'm going to stay with you here because both you and Mr. Orain have talked about voting as a way to get people the representation that they want and need. But it is a sad reality that most of us will spend more time researching a pair of speakers or headphones or television, flat screen TV, than we do researching the people who we are allowing to be voted into our positions of power, or who we are voting for ourselves, right? Sometimes you find yourself going, oh, I know this name, let me go along with this person. Or I just don't vote and I'm leaving that responsibility to somebody else to say what is best for me. How can we take a little bit more initiative? And I'm saying this without giving people a mandate that they have to go and now do a whole dissertation on who they're going to vote for, a whole research project on who they're going to vote for. How can we take simple steps to actually making sure the people we're voting for align with multiple values that we share, not just who is the same as you based on the economy or your religious beliefs or family, but whatever it is. How do we research properly? For example, it might be that we look at some of these organizations that send out reference cards of who they're voting for as well, or who they're supporting as well. What are some of those kinds of examples that people can use?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned voting because it is crucial. And it is crucial that we vote and that we are knowledgeable voters, as you indicated. The social media platforms that exist today are amazing. And so many of my friends are on every gram that you can think of, from Insta to all of them that I can't even name. So those are important platforms for those who are knowledgeable about candidates to use as with their friends. And we can take this to an important level if we use those areas to inform our friends. Many people do the texting. They still text the messages. When you send a message to friends about this, that, or the other, send a message about the candidates that you know if you've researched them. So this is an individual behavior that we all can take on. Instead of just looking up our favorite music, as you say, or this artist or that artist, look up the candidates, check their records, share that information. So then we are all responsible collectively for who we vote for. But the vote is really critical, but it's not just the vote. All right, you get your person in, say, track that person, stay on that person, communicate with that person. If that individual isn't providing the kinds of services that you need as one of the constituents for your community. So it doesn't just end if that person is elected or not elected. The work of governing is a continuum. It has to go on and it has to be all the time. You can never let up, because when we let up, we let bad things in. And we've seen inertia in the whole system of voting and what it means, because we haven't seen the results that perhaps we were looking for with the people we voted for. We have a responsibility not only not to put them back in, but to hold them account while they are in office.
Right. And and I'm
Can I
sorry.
say something, Khalib?
Yes.
Democratic rights are like muscles. If we don't exercise them, they'll wither away.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
our ancestors fought so hard for the right to vote in every democracy in the world. And if we don't vote now, that right is going to disappear. And so let's exercise just like you go to the gym. Just make sure you vote. Here's the rule. Just make up your mind to vote. And this thing about, oh, well, there are only two candidates running and I don't particularly like either one, so I won't vote. That is actually a vote in itself, because
Yeah.
you're allowing people who are probably extremists to decide what the outcome is. So go
Right.
and do your research and vote, no matter what. And that's true everywhere in the world. We're likely to have, we're constitutionally required in Jamaica to have general elections by early next year. So it's a realistic for us here. The other one that Pam, I'm so happy she mentioned it. There are two things that make democracies work: good leadership and good followership. In other words, you need to prod our leaders to keep on the straight and narrow and do what they promise to do. And the way to do that, ironically, is to track it. And we have more ways to do that now with social media than we have ever had before. You can keep a track of everybody's promises from 2 years or 3 years or 5 years ago and say, where are they with this? And
Right.
share it with your friends. In fact, maybe you should start a social media group called
Right.
How Has My Elected Representative Done Regarding His Promises?
Right.
And Mark, and see
So
what that says.
so
So
basically we're crowdsourcing the information that we need to do. I don't need to do all the research, but if you do some on this person and you do some on that person and we share that information.
but it requires a cultural mind shift. I listen to podcasts, and one of the podcasts said one of the issues we have with social media that has caused negatively is that people more and more treat politics like sports. In other words, they watch what's going on and they cheer for their side, and then they don't do nothing after that except go to the fridge and get a beer to drink. But
Because my team won.
get up from in front of their TV sets and go out there and vote.
Right.
And that's one of the risks we have of losing that impetus in order to choose our elected representatives.
And I will say that an observation that we can all share, I believe, is that in a time like this, when there is so much of a charge in the environment, when there are so many injustices and people are out in the street and there are causes that people are fighting for, you see that greater momentum toward, yes, let me exercise my right to vote. And then when everything dies down again, oh, it's not important anymore. So I don't know how some of the things that you've talked about, just people taking the initiative to undertake that for themselves and educate their own circles of friends. If you are one of those people, take that responsibility very, very, very seriously, please and thank you. And we are winding down. So let's talk about individual responsibility. So we've talked about how governments can implement change and we can effect change by our vote, for example, right? What are some of the ways that people can effect change on their own, in their own communities where they are right now, even if they don't have that philanthropic money that our viewers are going to be sending very promptly to the American Friends of Jamaica?
Well,
Ambassador
kick
Bridgewater.
it
Are
off.
you
Yes.
Okay, I'll go first on this
Okay.
one. First, besides voting and making sure you follow up, organize. Either start a group that you are passionate about a particular activity, or join one that exists already and support them in whatever way you can, whether actively in making the organization work or financially by donations. But you know, nothing gets done until people who are motivated get up and do something about it. So that's one. The next one is, wherever you see unjust happenings taking place, shine the spotlight on it. Evil abounds when good people remain silent.
They call
And
that call out culture in America.
it's all over the world, but then we have to realize that we're harming ourselves when we remain silent. So shine a light of truth on those things that you want to see change.
Right.
And you know, I have a saying that I like, that sunshine is the best disinfectant. In other words, shine a light, and the very fact that you shine a light and expose it
Yes.
will cause change. Now, do you realize one of the reasons why we're having this huge worldwide change in attitudes to what has happened recently in the United States? Smartphones with video cameras on them. So what is happening is that all these things have been happening for hundreds of years, for generations, but now a whole range of people who never knew of it or couldn't believe it and said it's too horrible to be true are now seeing it with their own very own eyes. And that's one of the powers of using technology in a powerful way. So, as I said, it's better don't curse the darkness, bring light to the fore.
Absolutely. Ambassador Bridgewater, same question to you. What can we do individually where we are to effect change?
Well, first, I really believe that each one of us needs to look inward, whether we're Black, white, albino, or what. Look at what drives us. Look at what our mindset is and do it in an honest way. You know, we can't or we shouldn't fool ourselves. Ask what our values are. What are the things we hold dear? And what, if any, racist attitudes or thoughts we may have? And it can go both ways, you know. And I think that once we come to a real assessment of what it is we think and feel, then we can start making change if we believe that change should take place. And that I believe we are looking now at a situation where more people believe that change should take place in a systematic and holistic manner. I think also that we need to listen more, again, at the community level. Go to a community or a neighborhood center that you know exists, that you may have driven past many times and not really know what's going on inside there. Stop and find out. See where you can help at all, if at all, in that particular community environment. And then I think that we need to also continue to work with groups of goodwill who are philanthropic, who want to do something to effect change in a positive way through their largesse and the resources that they have. But let us work with them to help them ensure that what they do contribute is not just a Band-Aid to cover a problem, but a Band-Aid that will heal and cause that problem to disappear. And I think that is so important, that the monies we get philanthropically enable groups to Blacks to become managers and owners, and not just recipients, but to institutionalize policies and programs that are going to make change that will be lasting and positive, and in the long run, be of benefit to everyone.
Right. So that actually was going to be my last question, just the importance of philanthropy and how others in the diaspora can help. So you've kind of answered that question, Ambassador Bridgewater. Can I throw that to you as well, Mr. O'Rean? How you've already mentioned the help from the diaspora in terms of the technology needs of Jamaican children and families. How else can the diaspora reach out to help right now? What's needed?
In all my life, and perhaps this was inculcated in me by my parents, and that's why I think the issue about this is the moment to reset how immediate families work in order to help each other to succeed in life. But I was always brought up to see how I could help people less fortunate than myself. It wasn't by my parents talking about it. I saw them actually doing it all their lives. So for me, now that I am retired and I have more flexibility, I love seeing how I can help people to get ahead. And what you know what I've found? What people want is just a little help to get over a hurdle. And after they've got through the hurdle, they're able to run on their own.
Right.
And so what I found, giving is a joyful experience. And I love it. And I encourage other people to give as well. And what you will find by giving is that you'll be happier, you'll be more contented. You'll say, I've found a way to make a difference in this world. And if you do it regularly, you will find also that you will draw goodness to yourself. I'm one of these people that believes when you do good, greater good comes.
Let,
So,
let me pick your brain a little bit this way though. You have found your passion in teaching young people entrepreneurship and self-sufficiency and business related things because that is what you love. So that's kind of more the question I'm asking. As a philanthropist, or you may say, I don't have a whole bunch of money, I'm not rich, I can only send $5 every now and again or send a barrel to my family. What else can people do? You know, just give some suggestions based on how you've been able to share
okay,
your particular passion.
here is one which I give to everybody I meet who said, oh, I can't do anything. I said, find one young person, whether it is your child, your nephew, somebody who lives in your community who doesn't have parents, or even a stranger. Go back to your high school where and ask the principal, is there some youngster who is in real problems, who needs guidance because they're without a father or a mother, and just guide that one person. That one person can become one of the wealthiest people in the world, which we have seen with people like Stephen Jobs, or they could become prime minister or president, or they could become like you, a successful media star, because somebody helped you, Khalid, early in your life to get where you want. So if each of us does that, we'll be amazed at the difference it will make and how rewarding it is.
May I add something, Khalid?
Certainly.
We talked about what our new normal is going to be like. And I think we've all learned to live in a new virtual world using technologies that we didn't know existed. I'd never heard of Zoom until COVID. I don't know whether to thank COVID or to curse COVID. But nonetheless, I am now relatively Zoom literate. So I think that all of us who've been in our homes, stuck with our computers or our phones, as Doug mentioned, there's somebody out there that you have some expertise you can share with. And you can share it via this medium. You don't have to travel to them or they to you. So groups like, again, AFJ, I'm on the board, so I do believe in what we do. We know groups that are community-based in Jamaica, and we know what some of their needs are. So we perhaps can be a conduit to help the diasporans, and we do have wonderful Jamaican diaspora that we engage, to then adopt a community, let's say. They not have lots and lots of money, but they may have a lot of knowledge and a lot of expertise in a subject matter that community is going to need. Jamaicans, I always used to say to my staff in Jamaica, I don't think there's anything that a Jamaican can't do and be successful at.
Agreed.
That.
Agreed. Thank you so much. And I'm going to just wrap it up with the point that I have observed that in this moment of inequality, to bring it back to the original subject of the discussion, seems to be spurring a lot of awareness, not just with the people who are facing the inequality, but the people who are perpetrating some of it. So you're seeing social responsibility become a thing among large corporations and the wealthiest among us, the celebrities who are advocating for Black Lives Matter and so forth. And And so, just back to that point of what happens to one of us really should matter to all of us. I think AFJ embodies that spirit where, the organization leans on the wealthiest among us to support the ones who are those that need that support. So kudos to the AFJ. Thank you to both of you for being on with us. Do you have any closing remarks before we wrap it up? Ambassador Bridgewater?
Well, thank you, Khalid. Thank you, Doug. And thanks to the AFJ team back in New York and in Jamaica. And I just think that this is a wonderful opportunity for us to engage with our listeners, to show ways that we as individuals and we collectively can indeed be our brother's keeper. Thank you.
Awesome. Mr. Orain.
So for you, I love Jamaican music, so I'll sing one line from a Jamaican song for you. Action, not a bag of mouth. And for those who are not Jamaicans, what does that mean? It means do more and talk less. And that's what we need to do for the future.
And Mr. Orain, I will be looking for my package of yam and breadfruit presently. Thank you both for this fantastic conversation. Thanks to all of you who have been watching. If you do have questions, please go ahead and share them with us. And please do stay tuned for the next installment of A Conversation With. I am your host, Khalid Thompson. I'm looking forward to seeing you here next time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Alec? Alec, you there?
He's showing credits.
I see
Oh,
credits.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Let's have a look at that. Okay.
Got Doug's book and my book up there.
Can I? Oh,
He's doing the credits.
okay, here we go.
Oh, it's your book, Pam?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yours.
Where can I buy it?
I'll tell you offline.
All right. Okay.
Amazon. It says both of them, huh? Amazon.
Both of them. You can get yours on Amazon. Okay.
I'm a self-publisher, so I didn't go Amazon.
Oh, okay.
There's some in Jamaica that you can get.
Oh, okay. All right.
I wonder if Alec is gonna come back on. I hope he's coming back.
Yeah,
I'm
he's
here.
on mute.
I'm here, guys. So we're just gonna let this part roll. I'm gonna change the audio behind it and just mute everybody on this part.
Yes.
And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we're out.
So I was of the impression that you're going to edit the whole everything, right? So those
Yeah.
little hiccups that were in there, you can clean them up.
Yeah, those couple little moments, we're not worried about that at all.
And shiny noses.
Well, that's a little bit tougher.
Oh, you can do it. I know you can, Alec. Please do. I didn't get my little shine cloth, so I don't have my PR people with me now. I'm just a free
I know.
master.
I'm not sure if Karen is going to come back and join us. She was watching the feed,
Okay.
not live with us here, but she's about maybe 20 seconds behind on a private Facebook link. So
Okay.
she's watching, and she's probably hitting credits right about now.
Okay.
So I will give her a call and see if she's going to jump back on with a final closing message for you all.
Thank you, Alex, so much for all you've done.
No problem, no problem. This
And
is
Khalid, you were amazing.
Thank
well
you.
done.
Thank
Well
you.
done.
Thank you.
You have a big future ahead of you, Khalid.
So the
Thank
live taping is complete. Would you like to step back in and just make a closing remark to the group? All right. So come right on. All right.
Yeah, thank you both. It is an honor to be in the presence of such greatness. I'm humbled.
Oh, we're honored to be with you. I'm proud of you.
Thank you. Hold on, Mr. Orain, I need to show you some stuff. Hold on 1 second.
Okay.
So, Madam Bridgewater, we still got some computer work to do with you, huh?
You know, I had 1 day's training on the computer in my whole life. South Africa. That was when we went from word perfect to word.
Wow.
Everything else I'm self-taught, Alec.
Nice. Nice.
Okay.
Oh, well done.
All right.
Well done. Well done. That's all right.
You're
Just
getting
persistent, you know, just keep touching buttons and using the little knowledge
That's
I
it.
have.
That's it. That's how you solve problems.
So I'm
Absolutely.
showing you some of my issues here on my Grace.
Ooh,
Grace
Nice,
things.
nice.
My
nice.
Grace jerk wings.
Jerk wings.
Wait,
I
wait,
got a
wait.
fridge full of Grace products that were given to me when I left. I got tons of good stuff.
Awesome.
So
So Karen, just to bring you back up, I know you were watching on the private feed. Were you able to sit through the credits and you saw it all the way to the end?
I did not. I hopped off a few times.
Got it. Got it. No problem.
So
Did you
is
have
there
it?
a way for
Everything
me to view it all in one, maybe later on?
Yeah. Yeah, I could prepare that link for you.
Okay, wonderful,
Problem.
wonderful. How did it go?
Wonderful.
Ambassador, how did it go? And Mr.
Went
O'Reilly?
great. Went
Oh,
great.
great. I had a
The
lot
lead
of
was
fun.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Like
Okay.
a polished professional, that has our own weekly or nightly show. Like
Yeah,
it
she was
felt really
super.
good.
Fantastic.
Felt really
See?
good.
That's great.
Yeah.
We were worried when our original moderator wasn't available, and Khalid, you came right in the
Oh,
Original moderator? Khalib's our original moderator. What do you mean?
right.
apparently not.
Hey,
No, it's all good.
Yeah.
sometimes when they put you in a game, you got to pick up the ball and run with it.
You
So
gotta run with it.
Yeah, thank you, Khalid. Thank you so much. And thank you, Ambassador and Mr. Orain. I'm sure it went very well.
Sure.
I
Our
can't
pleasure.
What's
start
Karen,
promoting.
question for Alex,
Yeah.
Alec and Karen. What's the timeline to get to the finished product for broadcast? Because people have been asking me. I don't mean to sound like Trump saying, oh, so people have been asking me when I'm going to be on, I'm going to be streamed.
yeah,
So
yeah.
Alec, you tell us the timeline for you to do your thing, and then we're gonna slot it on our schedule.
Right. Well, let's look at what we have. I wanna sit through it with you, and then we'll make our notes, and then from the notes, I could give you an exact timeline. But I mean, within a couple of days to a week or so is well within doable.
So this weekend is July 4th. So somewhere around next week, we should be ready. Mid to late next week.
Yeah, 8, 9, 10, 10
Okay.
8, 9, 10th of July.
Okay.
For sure.
Okay, and we will make the appropriate announcements, and we'll be promoting on social media and to our database. So there's a lot of hyping, a lot of buzz that we're going to create with this fantastic content.
Very nice.
Okay.
Alec,
Right.
Alec,
you.
other question. One of the things I do in order to help me present better on video is to go back and watch what I've done. Is it possible for me to see what the recording looks like? I won't copy it or share it or anything, but is there a link somewhere?
Those isolated recordings exist, and with Karen's permission, I have no problem releasing it to you guys. That's no problem. So that should be okay.
We'll certainly share with you as soon as possible, Doug.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
No problem,
And
no problem.
and Alec, you have the images of both books, and I like where
Yes.
you placed it, so it remains fixed as the credits are scrolling,
Yeah.
so people
yeah.
can get the information. So that's great.
Yeah. It seems though we made a slight mistake on that one also.
What happened?
Ambassador
I'm not on Amazon.
He's not on Amazon, so
My books are down at Stewart Motors. Diana agreed to keep them for me for people who wanted to go down there and buy.
How about people outside
Park
of
their cars down there, you know, because it's hard to park in Kingston.
How about people outside of Jamaica? The one that
self-publishing.
Contact me. Moi. Only me. I mean, I'm the one with the books. I'm in the third publication now. And when I sell these, I'll just have to have orders. It's gone very, very well.
Good.
It's a great book.
Contact me directly.
So we'll get that information.
I'll give you a P.O. box or something. I'll give you all that, okay?
Perfect.
My husband's P.O. box, not my address.
And along a similar line, I'd sent Karen a note to use Ian Randall Publishers as the online source rather than Amazon. Even though you can
Oh.
get it on Amazon, Ian Randall Publishers, who sells it, is a Jamaican-owned company.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do the local thing. You know, I'm not on
So
Amazon.
we'll collect that verbiage from you guys, and then in
Okay.
the live broadcast, we'll replace that with what
Right.
is
And there's another reason why I told Karen to use Ian Randall. They take a 20% commission and Amazon takes 55%.
Oh Lord.
And I mean, when you sell a book to Amazon, you can't make any money out of it.
No.
Wow. It's just the prestige of saying that it's, Amazon.
Yeah.
No,
Ease
I'm
of
not on
access.
Amazon.
Yeah.
Ease of access. Mr. Orain, if I may I invite you onto it. I host a live on Jamaicans.com every Tuesday evening, and we have a large Jamaican audience. May I invite you onto one of those
Is that audio or video?
video?
Oh, so I'll have to dress up again.
Just a shirt. We don't care about anything
Put
else.
on something other than a t-shirt. No, yeah, sure. I'm happy to help in whatever I can.
I think your entrepreneurial expertise would be very helpful to our audience, and they would appreciate it. So
Yeah. How long is the segment usually?
half an hour is mine.
Okay. And
15 minutes to half an hour.
It's what you're streaming live, so it's
Well, I pre-record as well and then stream it live to Jamaicans.com. It's a half an hour program, so the conversation goes from between the 15 minutes to half an hour.
okay. Okay, I'm happy to help.
All right, so I'll reach out to you. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you to all of you.
Thank you to everyone.
All right.
Thank you all. I can't wait to see the content.
Yeah, it's going to be
Very
great.
exciting. Yes,
Awesome.
fantastic.
Okay, Pam. I'm going.
Bye, Doug.
I'm going
Pleasure to meet you both. I don't know when's the next time we'll be able to speak, but thank you for.
It's our pleasure. I'll see you in the Apple, okay?
Well, we'll
See
see
you.
when
Right.
this becomes a series. It'll become so popular worldwide. People
That's
want.
right.
That's the goal.
That's
the goal.
right. When's the
Alex,
next one?
do you have the logo? Can you preview the logo before everybody goes?
Yeah, I can pull it.
Yeah.
It'll take me a few seconds. Give me just a few.
Very simple, but we're establishing a brand here.
Good.
We are. Oh, what's the brand?
And we did a whole bunch of shout outs to donate to the AFJ.
Yeah, we did a bunch of them.
Perfectly timed too. It wasn't like, over accentuated. It was like right in that sweet spot. So it felt
Perfect. That's what we
I
do.
like, and I have to say, we found you right in the nick of time too. Thank
Yes.
you so much.
it seems as so, no?
Alec, you were wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And
Well,
your
we still got more
support,
work to
too.
do. We still got more work to do, so I'm looking forward to doing that as well.
Thank you.
All right. All right, so I have it. It's on my desktop. Let me open this. Sorry for the delay, guys.
No worries.
Here is our logo. Bringing it in now. Very nice. And transition.
Okay. Looks good.
Simple. It should be on a white black background though.
Yeah, it's on a white background. I don't know why it's coming up black.
That's interesting. Oh, the white, because the white is see-through. The white is see-through.
Oh,
Transparent. Okay.
That's what's
But
happening.
you get the idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the speech bubble, the bottom
Right.
of the bubble.
Okay. Okay. Very nice. Very nice.
Okay.
All right, folks.
okay.
Thank you all. Thank
Have
you
a
so
lovely
much
day.
for your contribution. Stay well.
Happy U.S. Independence Day.
Okay.
Oh yeah, same to you.
Bye.
All right, bye.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Ambassador. Thanks, Philippe. Thanks, Mr. Orain.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, you too. Have a
Thank
good
you,
one.
Alec and Anthony. We'll be in touch. Okay.